We're live! Hello, everyone, and welcome to the live show for November, where we're going to be discussing The Turn of the Screw. I don't think we're going to do a massive summary for this book because it's in total probably only about 150 pages long, and there's not much to say about it without going into spoilery thoughts. But in summary, this is a kind of classic ghost story featuring a governess, a big fancy house, and some creepy children, and then scary stuff ensues, and that's basically what this book is all about. So I think we're all quite excited to dive into our discussions. Do we want to go around and just introduce ourselves for anyone who might be new here?
Sure.
Great.
Kira, do you want to go first?
I'm Kira. This is my yeah. And then Carolyn.
I'm Carolyn from Carolyn Marie Reads. Should we say our ratings too?
Oh yeah.
I gave it.
Do that.
I was in between like 4 and 5 stars, so maybe this live show will help me like make a dedicated decision.
Mm-hmm. Great. Lucy?
Yeah, I'm Lucy. I'm from the channel Crescent Pages, and I gave The Turn of the Screw 5 stars.
Yeah.
Mary?
Okay, hi. Wait, did you say Mary or Emma? Uh-oh.
I mean, anyone. I was just reading in order of my screen, but please go ahead.
I gave it 5 stars too. I was just like, yeah, it was so good. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm Mary from Mary Among Stories, and I was also between a 4 and a 5.
Mary?
So we'll see. It's probably like, yeah. Oh, am I frozen?
No, you're good.
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying I'm also between a 4 and a 5, so it's probably like 4.5, something like that.
Okay.
You're right, Kira.
Okay.
I think.
And then I realized I did not give my score, but mine was 2 stars. So
Really? Wow! I was not expecting that.
Yeah. Let's jump into it.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
This will be interesting.
You know what's funny though is I feel like Kira and I are the ones that like easily give it like a higher rating. So I'm very shocked that like Kira that you gave it a lower score. I'm intrigued.
Yeah. It's not like me, but I just wasn't feeling this one. But obviously you guys watching, if you want to leave your scores as well, I'd love to know what you rated it. See if there's anyone else who didn't like it, like me.
So I think someone else gave it 2 stars, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So, we also have a 3-star read as well. And then just a lovely comment, guys. I love you so much. We love you too.
Love you too.
Oh, we have more 2 stars.
So definitely a mixed bag, actually. Yeah.
Oh,
And then
a
you
lot.
like you guys 4s. So quite a range.
Yeah, it's really. That's good.
Does anyone have any spoiler-free thoughts? I know we've already said that there's not much to say without spoilers, but does anyone have anything general to say, maybe about the writing style or just the vibe of the book in general?
I think just on the writing, like I don't know what you guys thought of it, but especially kind of comparing it with other, I don't know, we've read a lot of Gothic stories now, I guess, and other Victorian ones. It was so, like, it was a challenge. It was challenging to, like, sometimes work out, especially in the dialogue and conversation, which was so fun. Like, what exactly was being said and what was trying, like, not to be said. I think that was so well done. Like, I loved it, but at the same time, like, it was, I, like, had to, like, reread a lot and be like, what are you even saying to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked the fact that that it was very difficult to figure out like what was true and what was false, or is it her imagination? Is she lying about this? Like, is this actually happening? So I really liked the fact that it made the story so much more unsettling because we didn't really know who to believe. It wasn't like this is exactly happening. it was kind of like you were sort of going through it with the narrator, not really knowing what was happening. So I liked that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That makes sense. I kind of didn't love the writing style. That was kind of the main reason why I gave it such a low rating, was because, like, for one thing, as like Henry James, have you ever heard of a full stop? Because his sentences are so long.
I know, yeah.
Like, come on. Like, finish, like by the time he gets to the end of a sentence, it's like he's on a completely different point to where he began, and I find that it's like really difficult to follow, to the point of being like, in my opinion at least, at the detriment of being able to understand and get invested in the story. So that was kind of like my main issue with the book.
Okay.
No, that's fair. That is a thing.
Yeah.
I guess it didn't bother me as much because here in Portugal we have quite a few authors who do that as well. Like the way they use punctuation is not exactly what you consider correct, I guess. So that's funny that you mentioned that, because I guess I'm just used to that. So maybe that's why it didn't bother me as much. So that's funny.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so any final spoiler-free thoughts, or do you want to jump straight into the meat and bones of the book?
I don't know.
There's so much,
yeah, it's so hard to not like get into the spoilers.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, so let's do it. Anyone got anything they want to kick it off with?
Well, there's a question in the chat. Maybe we should, because I feel like it's a good starting point. How did you guys feel about the main character and reading her diary? Yeah.
I think it was like so good because it added so many layers, because like you start and you're not reading her diary, you're just reading like an audience with the ghost story, and then this guy's like, hey, I have a manuscript that she told me years later that I wrote down, and then like the other guy listening is that like he has a copy of it too, so it added so much, and like so much more ambiguity than was already there in her writing, but like it was just so cool. I don't know, I really liked it. So yeah, I loved it.
There's an interesting point here which says that the book is an interesting depiction of psychosis. And I feel like there are a lot of different interpretations of what may or may not be going on in this book in terms of the paranormal, of mental health, and loads of different options. So I kind of wondered, like, what were your guys's like perspectives on, like, how did you kind of interpret the book?
Well, something that I found really interesting was how she kept describing these siblings as being like perfect, and she always called Miles like the perfect gentleman, and she talked about them in such like a way of kind of like she was adoring them and admiring them. But then all this creepy stuff was going on that they were doing and saying such strange things and acting in such strange ways that it made it like so unsettling. And I feel like the whole book was just kind of like this mishmash of her like describing what she was going through, but us not really knowing what to believe, and then not really being able to make distinct like thoughts about the characters, even like the two kids as well. So I just felt very on edge the whole time I was reading this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I found really interesting was how she perceived knowledge and the way that she defined things as the truth, because she would often like look at something, she looked at the children, and because they looked innocent, that's why she believed they were innocent. But she didn't have any like objective knowledge that was true, and that's what I liked about it, like how knowledge was kind of complicated in this questioning of how we actually know what is the truth.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she like just inserted herself into like whatever situation or conversation, and then would just like invent things that literally weren't even said, and would like write her own dialogue for people who hadn't even said anything. So
Yeah.
yeah, just like seeing through her diary was so interesting that way, because it was like, what is even going on? What is true?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like you don't really get an answer to that, like, at all. Like, there's no real conclusion, which
Mm-hmm.
is frustrating, but also interesting as well.
Yeah.
So, like, so did you think it was paranormal then, or did you think it was like more of an exploration of mental health?
I don't know. It could literally be like 10,000 things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it could be a mix.
Yeah, it could be both. That's what I was thinking.
I don't know. Like, and then the ending was just so interesting too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I generally, like, when it comes to books like these, I like often take it at face value and like assume that it is meant to be the paranormal and kind of read it in that way. But then, like, seeing everyone else's comments has kind of like made me think about the different ways that it could be kind of explored, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just also love how like when she sees, like when she's taking care of the children, like Caroline said, like at first they're so angelic and wonderful and amazing to her, and then it's like kind of starts to shift, and then with the whole ghostly elements and the two people she's seeing and thinks the children are seeing, it's like she's so angry and so frustrated and so just like, especially with the ending with Miles, it's like her relationship with them just totally changes based on what she thinks they're seeing. And then like, do you think the children see the ghost or not? Like, I don't know.
I think they do.
Yeah, wait, yeah,
Yeah, I think they do.
okay.
That's just me.
I don't know.
Because I feel
don't
like
know, because they're adamant that they don't.
exactly. So it's just like, I don't know if it's me being very untrusting, but I kind of feel like the fact that they're so adamant about not seeing them, and then just the way that they acted, the little things that they would say to her, just made me feel like it's because she was the outsider and that's like their territory, it's their domain. It kind of felt like, well, how could they not? Because that's their home. And if all of this stuff is happening, especially with these two characters that they have been in contact with, because like she has no relation to the ghosts when they were alive. But then like the kids have. So it's just like how can they not, you know?
Yeah, so you just think they're lying? Or, like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think they're lying.
Yeah, I don't know if they're lying. I think they might see them, but not realize that they're ghosts. They might be something else in their mind, I feel like.
What did you think about the ghosts? Like, did you find them creepy or not?
I don't know if I would describe them as creepy. I feel like I would describe them as like sinister, just because like I wasn't scared of them. I wanted to like learn about them. I wanted to know why they were there, and like I wanted to know their stories. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's a bit more like sinister and mysterious rather than like scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think like the children
Yeah.
with the ghost was scary though. Like
Yeah.
like the scenes where like Miles is just standing outside staring up at the house. I'm like, stop, like what are
Yeah.
you doing? Or Flora like goes out and takes the boat, and I'm like, no. I don't know. Kira, what did you think they were?
I just kind of felt like it was a little bit strange because like they didn't really seem like malicious or like particularly sinister in my opinion, because they just seemed very like lacking in character. They just kind of like kind of existed, kind of didn't. And then for that reason, I felt like the sort of governess, her response was very like melodramatic based on like not really seeing much, but obviously I guess it's kind of a reflection of like how differently we view things like ghost stories and horror now, because like I'm assuming when this was written it would have been like very chilling, whereas now I think we're like have such easy access to terrifying things that it just kind of lacks that effect, I guess.
I don't know. It also, like, when you finish the book and then you read the prologue again, it's just interesting because the guy, I don't know what his name is, telling Douglas, I think, telling the story is like saying how the governess is so like good and charming and amiable, and like it's years later and nothing's happened that we know of because of the incident with how the book ends and stuff. And I'm like, well then, I don't know, because if like he's saying stuff about her and that's all we really know. I don't know. It's just so frustrating, but like it's also you like it so much.
What about the existence of Mrs. Gross and like the role that she played in it? I feel like she's kind of quite an important character because she's the one that gives the ghosts like names and fleshes out the character for the ghosts, which I think is interesting because it's like, does the knowledge of the fact that these people that the obviously the housekeeper gives like a bit more context, and does that then like flesh out the reality of what she thinks that she's seen and kind of gives it meaning, and then it kind of takes on a life of its own, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, that is such a good point, because like she has no idea who they are until Mrs. Gross is like, oh, well, it could be this person. She's like, oh, it must be.
Yes.
Yeah. Definitely thought that was interesting.
Mrs. Gross is also just so interesting in this book, I think.
Yeah. What about her specifically did you find interesting?
Like the way that she reacted a lot of the time to the governess telling her things, or like she just, I feel like if that was me, I would have not been so chill, or like she just kind of takes it, and like she always knows more than she like tells you, or like the governess thinks that she knows more than she's telling her. So that was interesting. But then at the end too, when she takes Flora away, I'm like, is she taking Flora because she's concerned about the governess and like what's happening, or does she actually believe that like Flora would be better off away? Or I don't know, you just don't know again.
Yeah. But then it's like, if she really was concerned about the governess, then it's like, why did she leave Miles behind? Like, nothing really makes like total sense, I don't think.
Yeah. I also felt like Flora and Miles, even though I kind of saw them as like close siblings, sort of like on the same level, I felt like they were very like extremely different characters. Whereas like I feel like Flora was a bit more I don't know what the right word is. I felt like Miles had like more to his character than Flora did. I don't know if you guys picked up on that either. I kind of felt like we focused on Miles a lot, and the way that he like conversed with the governess, and I felt like Flora was there, but not as much as Miles.
The focus was definitely
Yes.
Yeah, he was like probably, in my opinion, the most interesting character, because he was like quite complex. It was difficult to read like what his intentions were, and obviously there's like the mystery of why he was like sent home from school and all of that kind of stuff. So it's like, did he again like kind of take advantage of someone that he perceived as being like slightly unhinged, and then like run with it to kind of add to that imagination, or is it real? Who knows?
Yeah. Someone said that my copy of the book has this on the back. One evening while sitting quietly at dinner, Henry James's father saw the devil. I mean, if that doesn't catch your attention, nothing will. Like, that's so cool.
This is interesting. Someone has kind of brought it back to Mrs. Groves and said that they think it's because of her lack of education that she kind of so easily believed the governess.
Oh, we lost Lucy.
No, she's back.
Okay.
Oh no, she's gone again. I'll keep an eye out.
Okay.
Well, so does anyone actually know how old Miles is? Because
I don't know. I guessed around like 11 or 12. Hello,
Yeah.
Lucy.
Sorry. Well,
oh, I did not mean to click on that. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. Like 11, maybe.
Yeah. Did they say? I don't
think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm like trying to figure it out. Obviously, he's old enough to be in school, but you know, young enough that he still needs a governess. And so it's like, how old is that? Difficult to say.
I don't know why I envisioned him as being like 10 or 11.
Yeah, me too.
I watched like an adaptation of this years ago, and like both the kids were quite similar age in that one. Like I'd say like between 8 and 10. But like I think that's just kind of a guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, because he does definitely have that like a way of talking that seems older than that. But I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. Someone also asked, what did you think of the window scene, I think?
Oh yeah, the window scene.
Yeah.
like the last window scene, like at the very end, or like the first one.
I don't know. Maybe both.
Okay, how do you think Miles died? Or like what happened?
I think that the governess like killed him, suffocated him or something.
Yeah.
It's like she saw herself as the savior, and that like overprotectiveness, like emotionally and physically, suffocated him because he was trying to escape the house. Like it was almost, he was the masculine presence in the house, and everyone else was like female. It was like him trying to break free of that female-centric environment. So it could be seen as like symbolic in that way.
Yeah.
I agree.
I also love at the end, like, well, like I guess it's through the whole book that there's like remarks about Bly being compared to like a ship, or the governess is constantly like, I'm steering our course at sea or something, and there's all this like ocean and ship and water vessel stuff. But then like the second last page of talking about Miles right before he dies is that like he might have been standing at the bottom of the sea and raising his eyes to some like faint green twilight. And I was like, oh, it's just really good. Because then like he drowns and she can't save him, or I guess she kills him if you interpret it that way. But that was just so interesting as well.
Yeah, definitely. It was like it's probably the most dramatic thing that happens in the whole book right at the end.
Yeah.
See, something that I've seen comments on here and on Discord that I had never thought about was like this interpretation of, I guess, comes about from like the quote quite early on where it says that Peter Quint was like too free with Miles. And obviously some people have like interpreted that in this way, which isn't something that I had like really considered, because it's not something that gets like a massive amount of attention in the actual book. But obviously that could be down to like when it was written and like sort of I guess like context of what was acceptable to talk about at that time. But like it's definitely interesting. And then there's this one which is like that the governess is projecting her like negative traits onto the ghost, which is quite interesting.
What did you guys think of Bly as a setting?
Oh, I loved it. One of my favorite parts. Yeah.
Like, did you find that the setting, because I feel like especially when we read Mexican Gothic, the house was definitely like its own character. So I don't know like if you guys felt the same way about this book.
I didn't feel like the house was as much of a character or a presence in this one. And like, for example, in Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, like that's another one where like the location is really important, or like Manderley and Rebecca. Whereas I feel like this one was kind of like just a house, and it was like a gothic mansion type setting, but I didn't feel like it added like a huge amount of character to the book.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Like apart from when she first gets there, and like just in contrast with like her upbringing and where she lives, like when she arrives at Bly and she's like talking about it, it like just adds, I guess, to the fairy tale and kind of castle-ish elements. But yeah, no, I agree. Like other than that, I don't know. I kind of wish there would have been more, because that would have been interesting. But
yeah,
yeah,
I think so too. Because I feel like it could have been like even more creepy if they made the elements of the house kind of incorporate with the ghosts. So,
yeah. Oh, someone asked about the uncle too. Why he wanted zero interaction or communication. Yeah, like does he know, or is he just lazy?
He's like, I'm gonna pay for someone else to look after them, so I don't have to.
Yeah.
I feel like it might just be the like context of the time, like that a single man, especially when it's not even his children, like wouldn't have taken that responsibility if they could financially afford for someone better equipped to do that job for them.
Yeah.
I think.
I don't want to compare it too much to the show, because the new like The Haunting of Bly Manor came out on Netflix, and I was saying to the girls that I watched it before reading the book, and all of these questions are answered in the show, but it's all like obviously different interpretations exactly how it was supposed to be, because we'll never know, obviously, because it's Henry James. But if you guys wanted to see like an interpretation of all of these questions get answered, then I definitely recommend watching the show, because I thought it was really great. So
I'm excited.
Yeah, and like even the uncle's storyline gets explained. There are even other characters that aren't really talked about in the book. It's just, I think it's a really great adaptation. So
that's cool.
Yeah, there's another adaptation that I liked as well, which was The Others. It is with Nicole Kidman.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I feel like this is a good explanation of the uncle, which is that the story might fall apart if there was a like successful authoritative figure instead of an unexperienced person facing the fears.
That's true.
Obviously, if he was there, you'd imagine like he would kind of put an end to all of the hysteria. Whereas, I guess again, it's people have commented on like the way that women and like hysterical women were portrayed at this time, and I think the fact that, as you mentioned, Lucy, it's kind of like a woman's sphere. There was like very little male influence, kind of adds to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I find really interesting about the uncle is how he's perceived by the governess, and adding into the whole hysteria thing, she has like this like obsession with him. She wants to impress him, and that's what is kind of compelling her to stay in the place. And it's kind of like it's adding into that concept of hysteria. Like she desires the uncle, so she wants to prove herself, and that's why she kind of sees herself as the hero in the story. See, I find it really interesting how she sees the uncle, and that's what is so interesting about this book. It's all from her perspective, so we don't really know what he's really like. It's purely her own perspective, which we get.
Yeah, definitely. He's like a character that isn't really a character, but is kind of a reflection of what she wants or expects him to be, which is interesting. Ooh, apparently there's another adaptation called The Turn. So many. I just didn't even know this many adaptations existed.
Yeah, maybe because they're aren't answers, so different creatives are like, oh, we're gonna make it like this way and explain like all these different characters' reasonings and
it does lend itself to that.
right to like different interpretations.
Yeah. So it's so open and like unclear. Because the adaptation I saw of it was a BBC one from 2009. And I remember being really creeped out by that, whereas I wasn't by the book, but at the same time, I was like 12, so it might have been because I was 12. So
Yeah.
difficult to say for sure.
Oh yeah, that's a good comment. Like it mentions Anne Radcliffe and Jane Eyre too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just love how she kept like referring to whatever was going on or what she was writing about as like a play or a performance or like a fairy tale or a story. And I'm just like, I don't know, like she kept mentioning it almost every other page to the point where I was just like, I don't think there's like any ghosts at all. Or like she sees them, but like I don't know. And I think it's so interesting, like in the prologue, or not the prologue, I keep calling it the prologue, but they say that she goes on to be like a governess for someone else or like for the narrator's sister or something. And I was like, well, then like what happened? Obviously you didn't get blamed for like killing Miles or anything like that. But then how do you just, I don't know, keep babysitting these kids?
Yeah. I quite like this comment, which I think is quite accurate.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like a very open book, but like you can think about like what you think might happen, and then that ending I think just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then this one I'm not quite sure about. Someone's mentioned like in some Stephen King books, like The Shining and Doctor Sleep, the like psychic ability lessens with age, but then I'm not quite sure how that would affect this story because obviously the governess is presumably an adult, and so like, but she's the one that like instigates having seen the ghosts, so I'm not sure.
How does she, the first time she thinks she sees something, she's like, she steps back into the house or something and she sees someone or like at the window, right?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I don't, even that, I don't know, like the window is looking out onto like whatever. It literally could have just been like person. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just like every incident is so good because it's like you could read it 100% one way or 100% the other way. I think someone said that like, where is it? I think it's gone. Oh, here it is. Oh yeah. It's like you can make your own interpretation. So whatever you see in this story says more about you than the story itself. And I was like, yeah,
that's true.
that's so
I like that.
Yeah.
I guess kind of like a like structural comment is that the prologue and specifically the fact that you didn't return to it is weird. So I think in a lot of ways I've like kind of compared this to Frankenstein in the sense of like being like a classic ghost story of the era. And obviously in Frankenstein you have that like similar framed narrative where you go through a different like set of protagonists, but I think it's quite neat in the way that it kind of ties things up at the end by returning back to like the protagonist that you had at the beginning. But yeah, it's quite strange that in this one like you just don't ever go back to it. It ends on like such a cliffhanger that he was like, yeah, I'm just not going to bother with
Yeah, it kind of felt like some of the pages were like ripped out at the end. You know, like there was more story, but we didn't get it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, no, you don't get it.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was just strange. Like, it maybe would have been better to just like have it written as, like, I don't necessarily think that the prologue added anything to the story. Like, he could have just written it as like just from her perspective.
Yeah, I feel like if it added anything, it added more uncertainty. And so I feel like maybe that was like on purpose. It's like, oh, I'll give you a little something, but I won't explain it. Kind of like the rest of the book, where it's like we are given these things, but they aren't like fleshed out.
I guess the one thing it does add is like the fact that you are like you know that you're removed from the narrative and that it's like already happened, and it's like a reflection rather than being like sort of like a play by play exactly as it happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then someone else said they just didn't think Henry James wanted us to know what happened.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
I think like the prologue too, it's like when it ends, like you feel like you were actually being told a story, and then you feel like you're like one of the audience members, but then it like asks, or it doesn't really ask, but it says like, oh, she's in love with someone in the story, but then he's like, oh, but it's not going to tell you in the story, literally, whoever it is that she's in love with. And then I think if I read it by itself, not with the prologue, I wouldn't really have like even thought about that at all in that like literal way, but even like with the prologue, I'm like, well, what's going on?
Yeah. Okay, so someone has said, let's discuss the title of the story.
Okay, let's do it.
So obviously, like the title of the story comes from within the prologue, where they talk about like
two children
turning the screw and two children turn two screws. Yeah. With the child gives the effect another turn of the screw, what do you say to two children? So like I really know what that means.
I feel like it was referenced like later in the book as well. I can't remember when it was.
Yeah.
I feel like, was it Mars who said something?
Yeah, it was more
I
towards.
can't remember though.
I think it's her. I think she says it about like.
Is it her?
Something.
I should have like tabbed it.
Yeah, I saw it. So like this could be. I think that this is another thing where I feel like Henry James's ambition was to kind of create all of these elements that had to make the reader think and interpret on their own. So I feel like my interpretation was, because like I took it literally, where it's like, okay, well, what does turning a screw do? It tightens something. It, causes. I don't know if it causes more pain, but I kind of felt like it sort of had the same image in my mind of like twisting a knife, like turning a screw. So there's this, what is the saying where it was like the last nail in the coffin, or there's some kind of saying like that where it was kind of like, it just gave me a similar feeling as that. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense.
Okay.
I also think like kind of going off of that imagery of like tightening something, you've also got like the reverse of like loosening the screw and things being like unhinged and like everything kind of coming loose, which is quite an interesting image.
Yeah. I kind of want to like Google it now and just see what like Google says. Would you mind if I did that? Okay.
I found the other reference to the turn of the screw. So it's, I don't know obviously what page it is for you. It's chapter 22, and she says, let me see. I could only get on at all by taking nature into my confidence and my account, by treating my monstrous ordeal as a push in the direction unusual, of course, and unpleasant, but demanding, after all, for a fair front, only another turn of the screw of ordinary human virtue. So she's kind of saying that this situation, she just needs to apply her human virtue. And it's again like enforcing the idea that she can like make everything right. She can turn the screw and she can fix everything. I'm guessing that's
a really good one too.
Maybe how you can interpret it, but
mine comes with like a glossary.
Oh, cool!
Like what it means, because it's a weird edition. But yeah, it talks about like one. It says one of them is like the build up and suspense or whatever that we kind of talked about. But then one that I don't think we really mentioned and I didn't even know about. It says one critic suggests that the screw might refer to a thumb screw, which is a medieval instrument of torture which crushed the fingers and thumbs. And then I guess the governess is like tortured by the ghosts and herself. But yeah, they're just all so good. It's just like the title's just like the story, and then it's like both ways all the time.
Yeah.
Google says that turn of the screw as in it tightens the dramatic tension.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
So kind of like returning back to the role of the governess, I feel like someone here says, oh no, that's the wrong one. Ignore that. She thought that they thought that the governess saved the children from the influence of the spirits. Now, my personal interpretation is that she actually was like the opposite of that, because she kind of brought the reality of the like evil spirits into their lives and kind of like drew attention to it and made it more of a dramatic. But I feel like I'm just interested to know what side you guys sat on.
I think, yeah, I agree with you, Kira, because I kind of feel like she's the catalyst of like making the situation worse in a way.
Yeah.
I feel like inadvertently, because I feel like she believes herself to be the savior, but actually in reality isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the opposite.
Yeah.
Someone also said, talking about the title, what about that? What about the opposite? Maybe turning the screw to undo something, like her hysteria unraveling. And I really like that.
That's the image that came to my mind, was like that, because I feel like that is kind of like what we see as the book goes on, is like everything gradually unravels from what like is perfect, the interpretation of the children being like completely angelic and like can go wrong, and like gradually all of that like perfection unravels, which is interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it was just like, I don't know, like a detrimental situation, because like, well, all like Flora's and Miles' answers to her on every single question, like you could take as being kind of weird and suspicious, but then maybe like they're just weird kids or something. Or they could just be perfectly normal, especially Miles, because he's just so like polite, but in a vaguely threatening way. But then what was I going to say? Like, obviously it ends and Miles is dead. But before that, like all of her, I don't know, I just felt like she was so possessive of the children, and like she wanted to be their sole kind of caretaker and their sole informer of what was going on in the world and teaching them things. And then when there's like these vague, maybe not even real threats of like their past teachers and their past caretakers, she just kind of flips out and loses it, even if the children don't actually like see that or are even thinking of that at all. So yeah, no, I would agree with that too.
Yeah, I agree. It's very much looking at how the governess wants to like impress herself onto them. And there's a quote at the beginning where it says, "To watch, teach, form little Flora would to evidently be the making of a happy and useful life." So like that is, she wants to have complete ownership over them. And you could see the ghosts, because they are the predecessors of like her position. They're the ones that looked after the children before. So it could represent how she's like haunted by her predecessors, and she feels like she has to defeat them and overcome them to gain full ownership over the children.
Especially because they were like in a relationship or something with each other, Miss Jessel and Quinn. So I feel like that adds another turn of the screw.
So someone said that they found the ending confusing with what Miles cried out at the end. And then they follow that up and say, did it prove that he could see the ghost, or was it only proof that the governess played that fear on him? I'm reading that passage, and like it's just such a like suddenly very action filled like final passage that it is really difficult to decipher, I think, exactly what happened.
I just, the fact that like she's saying he keeps like looking around the room, like searching so like desperately for whatever she's seeing like a number of times. And like, does he, I don't know, I don't think he like sees.
Yeah, because he doesn't seem to see it. Like, he's asking what she means, he's asking where, and then she then is like, well, what does it even matter? I've got you now. And then he's dead. So it's like, whoa. I think, that they didn't. I just genuinely feel like he didn't see him at that time, at least, which,
No, I agree.
Also, someone just commented to say that the link to your channel isn't working, Emma, so I will update that after the live show is finished. But
yeah, I don't know.
And then he's dead. Lol.
Like, he does say like Peter's name, but like she says Miss Jessel's name first, so like then he's like thinking of them. So like, yeah.
Interesting. I like to say everyone is a hero of their own story, so it seems unlikely that the narrator here is a villain. And I'd agree that the narrator isn't a villain. I just interpret the narrator as being like misguided and therefore like inadvertently doing things to the detriment of the people that she's meant to be caring for, but not. I think what makes a villain, in my opinion, is like the intent, and I think her intent is positive, but that doesn't mean that the actual result is positive.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts, questions, things you'd like us to discuss? Please do leave them in the sidebar, or anything else you want us to discuss as well. Just throw it in there.
I also love that like there's so many like documents and just like a whole number of things we don't know aside from the ghost. Like we don't know like we kind of know what the governess wrote in the letter, but then like what Miles said at school, like we just have no idea what he did at school. Yeah, I don't know. Like you kind of can guess, but I don't know.
Yeah, like this whole story is about the unspoken, the unnamed, and like that's where the true kind of horror comes from, because like you can't ever truly know what's actually going on. And that's what the whole book is about. It's about like not being able to have this knowledge, have this truth.
Yeah. I feel like that's what's so powerful, even about like Daphne du Maurier's books, is like she really doesn't give you a straight answer or a very like complete ending. She kind of leaves it open-ended and it's up for interpretation. And I feel like in this genre of books where they're like sinister, suspicious, mysterious, gothic, it's almost more impactful to not give answers, because then it leaves you thinking about it, and there could be so many different answers that it's like, I feel like sometimes when I read a book and everything is tied up with a neat little bow, it's not as satisfying. So I do like when the stories are a bit like open-ended.
Yeah. I like how it like makes you like feel and know exactly what like she's going through when like you yourself as a reader just become like exactly like her, trying to find out like what's going on or what's not going on. But yeah,
Definitely. I feel like potentially I've like misspoken or made it seem like I think that she's like a major villain when I definitely don't. I just feel like that it's like you said, like she's very much like trying to figure out what she thinks is going on, and therefore like ends up doing things that have negative consequences without actually having that intention, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's from her desire to be the hero that her kind of overprotectiveness and like that is kind of the cause.
Exactly. It's like horrible irony. As females, did we like Henry James's interpretation of a 20-year-old woman?
It's a great question.
I mean, not particularly, but again, that's kind of like, I didn't like his interpretation of any of the characters really, because I felt like, again, like I mentioned at the beginning, the way that he wrote this book, I think, put a barrier between you and all of the characters, because it's so like unreliable that you don't really get the chance to get to know the characters properly, I don't think. So no, but not just specifically the way that he wrote female characters. I just generally wasn't as keen on his characterization of all of them.
Yeah, I also feel like if it was any other woman, any other 20-year-old woman, like a different, it's not like it's an archetype of the 20-year-old woman. I feel like she's a very specific character. Like, put any of us in that situation, and I felt like we would have acted very differently. So I don't think it's like all women, I see all women this way. I think it's more like this is how this one particular woman acted in this situation, to make an interesting story. So I was bothered, but not really, because I feel like it was kind of his intent, and it was an element of the story to make her that way.
Yeah. I think there's like a little bit, I don't know if it's too much because it is part of the story, but like hopping onto the whole like psychosis and hysteria and like really kind of like trying to drag it out and use it to like either balance or like run beside what could be the other thing you guess about the story or like your other interpretations, because that's always like a constant thing, I guess, with the Gothic. And like with the Gothic, it's just not that she's similar to like people from like the Mysteries or like the Castle of Otranto or like the Monk, but it's no, she is though. But like it was definitely down that line too. I think that like she wasn't, I don't know, I don't know, like every single question you try to ask about this book is
it's like 500 answers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like you could write like 50 books about this book, 500 books about this book. But
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think she suffocated him at the end, because there's like 3 different paragraphs where like he's struggling to breathe and he's like becoming really hot and sweaty, and like gasping for air, and then his heart stops. So I feel like that's what happened. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is interesting. Someone said that she didn't feel like she had a personality at all.
Yeah.
Because I feel like she was so consumed by her like role as the protector that she kind of like, she didn't really have a personality of her own, because she was so focused on what she thought her purpose was. I think that became like the all-encompassing part of her personality.
Yeah. And there's so much where she's giving away herself and her personality to the children, and just like she constantly saying how she becomes whatever they need or whatever they want at the moment, or whatever fairy tale or like play whatever thing they're doing, she just becomes that. So I don't know, that was really interesting too, like her identity with the children, how like the 3 of them kind of connected and stuff.
So any concluding thoughts? I feel like we've generally spoken about everything, but we also could spend like another couple of hours dissecting everything. But like, any concluding thoughts, changes to ratings, anything like that?
I think I still would give it 5. I don't know.
I feel like I'm gonna stick with 4, just because like it didn't give me like the feelings that a normal 5-star book would give me. And I also feel like I would want a bit more from the other characters, even though like this is such an intentional book. I feel like every sentence, every word had an intent, and he put it there on purpose. I do wish that there was just like that maybe he included a little more with the house, or gave us a little bit more of the other characters. Yeah, it's not like the perfect 5-star for me. So I think that's why I'm going to keep it at a 4.
I think I'll probably stick with my 2, just because I read this for the first time at university. I studied it, and I 100% agree that it's a great book to study, to dissect. There's so many things to say about it, but from like a personal enjoyment perspective and like comparing it to other Gothic texts, I just didn't feel like I was as affected or like enamored by the atmosphere of this book as I generally like to be from Gothic books. So that's kind of where my rating comes from, but
Yeah.
it's an interesting one to discuss. And someone has asked if we have a Discord group. We do. The link is in the description, and I did check before I put it live and it should be working, but I also checked the other links and Emma's isn't working, so I will double check after the live show and make sure that it's there. So, any more thoughts? Any final questions? If not, I think that will be it for the turn of the screw.
Yeah.
Next live show will be on Carolyn's channel. Do you want to just like remind everyone of what the books are for next month and when the live show will be?
Sure. The books for December are going to be A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which I'm so excited to talk about, and These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, which I am also very excited about. And did we decide on a date yet? Because I know like Christmas, New Year's is at the end of the month, and normally we do our live show at the end of the month. So I just wasn't certain about that.
Saturday would be the 26th of December, but
okay, that's the day after Christmas Day.
The big day, yeah.
So I mean, I feel like I should probably. I think that'd be fine if that's fine, if that's okay with everybody else.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay. If anything changes, we'll of course like update our Instagram and Twitter and everything. But yeah, very excited.
Yeah.
And we will be doing some fun things for the month of December, so keep an eye out for that. But
yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to everyone that joined us. I really hope you enjoyed hearing all of our thoughts on this one. I knew it was going to be an interesting one, and there's still so many things to say. But thank you for joining us, and we will see you for a festive live show next month.
Yay!
Bye.
Bye.